Hi, it's 11:45 and I was going to do another What Do People Do video. What do people do at Elevenses? Because it was 11 o'clock when I started. But I tried my second live video today, having done a very brief one yesterday just before beating the bounds. And it took me some time to work out how to get it right. What's particularly annoying is that I can't use the phone in horizontal mode, landscape mode, because every time I try that, I get a message saying something about please unlock orientation or rotate back to portrait. And I don't seem to have the control needed to unlock the orientation. So I'm going back to horizontal mode unlive, because that way I get the use of more screen area. But I'll try more live ones. So now I'm in Broad Street and I'm standing outside our much loved and sadly departed department store Boswell's, which would have been a brilliant place for a cafe or for a coffee, because it had a really nice cafe, very sort of genteel, a little bit Edwardian in its appearance, on the first floor, and nice big sunny room with lots of lace and cushion covers and such like pastel colours. And it was very relaxing, but that's gone with the rest of Boswell's. Boswell's turned into a hotel called The Store, and they've put a lot of tables outside for dining and for coffee. And that's them. The lady there is setting the tables now. And one of the nice things about Broad Street now is that the city got rid of the parked cars that used to run down the centre of the street and replaced them with these tubs and seats near the tubs. And the cafes have put out their own tables as well now that there's more space and less traffic. So when the weather's good, this is a very nice area to sit and relax. You might argue that Corn Market would be a better choice, because Corn Market is where more of the shops are. But Corn Market just is not attractive. This is the world's first Oxfam shop. And the story told me about that was by the chap who runs the Oxfam bookshop in St Giles. That somebody called Joe Mitty in 1952 was in charge of a shop that helped people in need by collecting donations and sending them to these people. And then he realised that you didn't need to send the donations themselves, you only needed to send the money made by selling them. And so that's what he did. He changed his shop around so that the donations were sold there and the money was sent to the recipients. And that was the world's first charity shop, and it was an Oxfam. Cakes and rolls.
What?
Now they have a different policy. Taylor's I stopped at yesterday at the top of St Giles had recently stopped taking cash and was only taking cards. These people say they prefer payment in cash. And this looks to me the same style of coffee van as Justin's, Just in Times in the market. I think that's a Citron. That on the left is Blackwell's, Oxford's biggest bookshop and probably oldest surviving bookshop. And it has a cafe on the first, I think it's the first floor. And there'll be people there. Blackwell's traditionally don't mind if you take their books and sit in the chairs reading them for a bit before you decide whether or not you actually want to buy them. So you'll see people in the cafe reading Blackwell's books and reading other things. In fact, there is an academic ceremony that happens in the Sheldonian every year called Insenia. I did a video about that last year. It happens in the week after the end of summer term, which is the 9th week, and it's on a Wednesday, probably be around about the 20th of June this year. The Bodleian Library, which is near the Sheldonian, is closed while Insenia is on, probably for security, and that's been the case for decades. The Insenia ceremony is, well, it's sort of industrial grade Latin. Just about everything is in Latin, including description of the latest scientific researches for which the people getting the honorary degrees are being honoured. And the university has an official called a public orator, whose duty it is to write the speeches in appropriately classical and nicely structured Latin, and then to orate them. And one of the things he has said at least once is that it doesn't matter if the Bodleian is closed for the day, because we have a supplementary library over there, and anybody who wants to read a book while the Bodleian is closed for Insenia can go and do so in Blackwell's.
I'm not sure it's going to work.
Don't know what you're trying to do.
I belong to the Sheldonian.
There's people in the King's Arms and people outside, and I can see one over there with a beer. Looks like a dark beer from here, so it might be Young's Stout or Young's Porter if they do those. This is Parks Road, and there are no cafes, which is a shame because I think it would be really nice to have a few tables just here. But I think it's rained during the night, and there's a delightful smell of what they call petrichor, which is what happens. It's that sort of damp smell you get rising from freshly wet earth. And there's a sort of grassy, new-mown grass, slightly damp smell too, which is very pleasant. There's a few people already sitting on the lawn of the University Museum and drinking and eating goodies from Horsepox Coffee. These are various bits of Keble College. And I'm now coming up to something I'm very glad to see is still here. It's almost a year since it was remade. And it used to be an iconic Oxford landmark. And once it was remade last June, it again became one. At least I hope it's still there, because the wall looks very clean. Oh yes. And there it is. It's the Keble College dinosaur. And according to a Reddit thread, that's the social media channel REDDIT, according to a Reddit thread, it might have been one of the Oxford groups, the dinosaur was painted in 1970, and the person who tells the story there gives credit to people that they actually knew. And I talked about that in a video that I did about a year ago concerning this dinosaur. It was painted in the 70s then and has always been visible but faded a lot over the years until you could barely see the chalk outline. And now I'm very glad to see that it's been repainted and is still in very good form. And so is the blue dinosaur there. There used to be a red dinosaur as well, with the legend, I think it was remember what nearly happened to the red dinosaur, but it has gone. And I suppose it was behind the blue one. Well, if Heineken refreshes the parts other lagers don't reach, you may remember that as an advertising campaign. I refresh the parts that other tourist guides don't reach. And I'm now going towards the University Computing Laboratory. Because people will be enjoying coffee there. It's got a rather nice open atrium inside the building. And some of them will be slugging down coffee anyway, just because they've been up all night debugging computer programs or working on mathematical theorems, and they need the coffee to give them mental stimulation and to keep them awake. I talked the day before yesterday, when I went round the science area, about working Oxford and what it's like to work in the university. And that sort of intense, focused thought is a necessity. The ability to do that sort of intense, focused thought is a necessity for people here. He wasn't speaking English, but you get collaborators from all over the world, scientists who come and visit or take degrees here. And one of the things people do here is to work on methods for building really, really big computer programs in such a way that they work. And that may seem trivial, but it isn't, because humans make mistakes. There was a study once that showed that, I think it was about 30 3% of spreadsheets contain at least one error. And computer programs are no better. People just aren't capable of that much sustained attention, even with coffee. So you need methods to help them find errors and to help them put things together in a way that means they don't make so many errors. And one way of putting programs together so they don't make so many errors is to divide a big task into lots of small tasks, such that each small task can be completed and tested and written instructions for independently of all the other small tasks. So then at the end you have a nice, clean, structured assembly of lots of completed small components, and you can just sort of wire them together into one big component. And this is called separation of concerns, or only do one thing at a time. And it may seem obvious, but it isn't. And you need to teach people how to do that, and you need to work out better ways of doing it, because not everything naturally goes together in a way that enables you to put lots of small pieces into one big piece. Genetics doesn't seem to, for example. So that's one of the things that working Oxford will be attacking. But it will be having coffee too, and talking about the work that it's doing, because sudden gust of wind, sorry. But it will be having coffee too and talking over coffee about the work that it's doing, because most of these people actually do love their work and they're very glad to have the chance to do it. This is called IT services, for information technology services. It used to be where the university's mainframe computer was, and there's a big sort of addition to these Victorian buildings round the back that housed it. I don't know what it houses now, probably offices. The story was that when there was a mainframe computer, it had to be air conditioned, so the room was nice and cold, and some of the programmers or some of the staff would go to local pubs and buy crates of beer, that bit's certainly true, and keep them in the machine room because it kept them nice and cool and ready to drink. And there is also a story that a former director of the computing service found out about this and stopped it. Actually, I might have got that wrong. It might have been in their air-conditioned offices instead, I'm not sure. But the beer bit is certainly true. Now, I crossed this way because I'm coming to another bit of the university which won't feature in some of the guides because it's too new. This used to be a hospital, the Radcliffe Infirmary. That's the hospital chapel, St Luke's. I think all hospital chapels are called St Luke's, aren't they? And oh dear, that's the Maths Institute. And it's not all that long since it was built, and they seem to be doing something to the roofing already. Why do they need to re-roof it after only a few years? And this is Penrose tiling. If you have squares or rectangles, you can arrange them in a repetitive pattern. You can make one line of them like that, and then you can repeat the lines in that direction, so you get a two-dimensional grid. What Penrose and others showed is that there are ways of, it's called tiling, ways of covering an entire two-dimensional surface with shapes that are not all identical to each other, like those are, and which do not repeat in a regular pattern. That's obviously much more complicated, but you can see that it's possible. And it's a strange sort of twisted beauty. There's pattern there, but it's not an obvious pattern. And you can't summarise it in your mind in the same way that you can the repetition along there or along there, because it's too, it's too non-repetitive. There aren't any bits that come over and over again for your mind to grasp as units and to build into piles of lots of the same thing. And that's one of the ways that human minds understand complicated systems. It's by thinking of them as lots of similar parts and then just imagining one part and separately imagining lots of parts. And in a sense, getting hold of these twisted, not quite repetitive patterns is one of the things that a mathematician has to be able to do. You've got to be able to find the structure in apparent chaos and then think about it and think how you might have to change it to do new jobs, or how you can describe it succinctly to people who you're working with, or how you can turn it into a computer program and do so using as little time and memory as possible, so that the computer doesn't overflow its storage or keep running until the middle of next year, which actually it seems that my video conversions keep doing, but that's another story. So it's like entering another land, in a sense, where the rules for moving around and the rules for seeing what is what and recognising objects are there, but they're much more complicated than the rules that we have built into us in our own land. Actually, that may not be true. It's just that evolution has fitted us with the rules we use, and so we don't have to consciously work them out, whereas we didn't grow up in this sort of environment, and so we do have to work out its rules. But it is, some people will say, like entering an alien land that you don't understand from scratch, and where you have to master a complex discipline merely to move about. But once again, people will be drinking coffee there. There's a cafe called Cafe Pie, which the sign says is open to the public. And there'll be loads of mathematicians there drinking and thinking. there's another example of apparent structure in chaos. I don't know what that represents, but I wouldn't be surprised, given what I know of the maths literature, if it's an attempt at representing some, say, four-dimensional shape as a three-dimensional solid. We can represent three-dimensional shapes in 2 dimensions. That's how perspective works and why art is complicated. And this takes the idea 1 dimension higher, probably. No climbing, it says. It is possible, though, that it's something else. There are mathematical structures called groups that represent such things as different motions, say motion 1 place north, 1 place south, 1 place east, or 1 place west, and how those combine, or that model rotations. Rotation 1 degree, 2 degrees, 3 degrees, 4 degrees, and so on up to 360 degrees, and how do those combine? And the structure of groups can be represented as solids or solids in more than 3 dimensions, sometimes insanely complicated ones. And it could be that that is one of those representations. I can't tell without reading the label. If I were a mathematician working in that branch of knowledge, then I'd probably know straight away, but I'm not. That is the Blavatnik School of Governance, the sort of Perspex building. And that is the Thomas Schwarzman Centre for the Study of Humanities. Reputedly, it cost 125 million. And when I first saw it, I praised it for the speed at which it seemed to be going up. But it's now been over a year since I first saw it, so I'm no longer as impressed as I was. Still, we need humanities too. It gives us something interesting to think about, and it gives scientists such as AI researchers something to apply their skills to. That's only a very secondary reason. It makes the world richer. A famous, a well-known science fiction writer called Greg Egan once said that the greatest gift of consciousness is the ability to take into ourselves the patterns of the universe and to appreciate them. And that applies just as well to the patterns you find in art and literature and the other humanities subjects. Let's include history, why not? As it does to the sciences. The universe, both human-made and natural, is full of wonderful patterns. That's what the Schwarzman will look like, allegedly. And this is Walton Street, which has been becoming more restaurantified. And which has a good selection of cafes. And oh, what's happening here? No, it's just somebody doing some outside work. Probably this guy. And there are a few long-standing Indian restaurants here, such as Jamal's, and some fairly long-standing delicatessens and cafes, such as the Jericho. Hang on. Oh no, this isn't the Jericho Cafe, is it? It's a new cafe that used to be a plant shop and florist called Daisies, TCG. And that is Manos, the Greek cafe and delicatessen. That's a branch of Mamma Mia, the pizzeria in Summertown. And this espresso bar opened during the first year of the pandemic, during or after one of the lockdowns.
Or what they might say.
That is Jericho's remaining independent grocer. There used to be shops down a lot of the side streets, but there aren't anymore. This place, as I've mentioned often, has remained boarded up since the start of the pandemic. This is unusual. It's the first attempt to spearhead a push into the north by establishing a cafe here, Broche. This is the end of Leckford Road. And that is the cafe with outside seating, and that's useful to know. Give him a boost and try it. It's good coffee. Southmore Road, which is a little sort of staple shaped road that runs behind Walton Street like that. Runs behind Kingston Road, actually. William Lucy Way down there on the left, which I've started and ended several canal or river related videos at.
Thank you.
That's the little loopy bit that goes down the left and joins up at the end. Some nice white roses here. Not much smell. Interesting tinges of red there. That is Port Meadow. Hi, what's happened to the trees? Why?
None of us know why, but you live around the corner from me.
So this is the entrance to Port Meadow, and in my What Do People Do at Lunchtime video, where I filmed the queues for finals, I mentioned trashing, and this is the sort of thing the university says. Exams. Celebrate smart. We want you to celebrate after your exams. Follow this important advice to have fun and mark your achievements while following these essential steps. Stay safe. Look after each other and avoid areas near water, especially if you've been drinking. Make it green. Celebrate in ways that don't damage the environment. Avoid fines. Don't take part in trashing to avoid £150 littering fines. Respect others. Celebrate away from exam venues out of respect for other students. Tidy away. Clean up after your celebrations. And then there's a web address. So that's how the university thinks about post-exam celebrations. And here, in that order, are thistles, cows and Wolvercote. And sometimes it all gets a bit much and all you want to do is to go for a walk and look at some boats. This is me on Bossoms Marina, Port Meadow. See you next time.